What are the top 2 or 3 things you would do differently if you could go back and redo that first property? What did you learn from that, and what would you do differently?
Okay, so I would say first thing would be have an understanding of the rehab that is needed. Pretty much, we just went blindly on that. Second, it was more
like a true understanding. Like, this is going to cost this much. Get quotes, get estimates in advance.
Yes.
Yeah, I buy properties now sight unseen, but I couldn't imagine buying my first.
Yeah, exactly. Like nowadays you see pictures like, okay, so I'm going to assume I need a roof. I'm going to need all of this because you always assume the worst, right? But back then we're like, oh, it looks good. It
looks good. Yeah.
Great. The pictures, right? No roof. Yeah, exactly. Like no roof. Great. The plumbing, it says there's nothing wrong with the plumbing on the listing. Right, plumbing is good. Right. So like now it's more of okay, so I'm going to assume plumbing, HVAC, all of this need to be replaced. I'm going to make an offer based on that. In this case, I just went like, hey, everybody's, the seller says it looks great. So I'm going to assume that. I know better now. So I would say all of that. I run my numbers better now. It did work out because we bought it for $70,000. We put in $3,000. We did the bare minimum because we had no money. We put like $3,000. We've put in more money since then, of course, because we needed and new plumbing and all that stuff. But now that house is worth like $350,000.
So do you rent that house now? You didn't flip it. You were trying to rent it.
Rent it, yes. We are long-term hold, yeah.
So your whole goal in this, your strategy, which is similar to the people that listen to this podcast, listen to this show, is how do I find properties that cash flow the absolute most and rent them and hold them long-term, right? We're not flippers. Not that there aren't flippers that listen to this, but we're not flippers. We're not trying to create chunks of cash. So you have a similar goal, which is I'm trying to find great properties that just cash flow for a long time and set you financially free.
Yeah, long-term wealth. Like that is our number one strategy. Not to say that if there's a property that is not making much money, we're open to selling it and doing like a 1031 exchange. But for now, our properties are cash flowing. We're pretty happy with what we have.
Okay, that's great. So tell us a little bit. I want to back up in your journey a little bit because, okay, so I'm sorry, I interrupted. You were actually going to say a couple of other things I think that you would do differently.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So first you were like, hey, I would have had a real true understanding of the rehab. What else would you have done differently on that property if you could go back and do it all again, knowing what you know now?
Okay, so you're going to be like, Ingrid, how did you do this? Okay, so when we were painting the property, because it was just my husband and I painting, we didn't have money to hire anyone else. This one individual came, like walking, and he's like, hey, are you guys renting this? And I'm like, yeah, we're renting this. And then he's like, oh, great. I got like 2-3 months rent right here in cash. Can I rent it from you guys? And we're like, oh my gosh, yes. And that's it. Like no background check, no screening, nothing. So we had like 3 months rent up front and we did not see a penny more from this individual. So our first tenant was our first eviction. So I would say definitely will not be doing that again. I am not doing that again. But definitely that's like another thing that we learned very quickly was make sure that we had an SOP, like processes in place in order to screen tenants.
I want the takeaway to be that you're still here. You and your husband survived.
Yes.
You have more properties. So like I think it's cool because like you made so many mistakes without mentorship, without coaching, without bigger pockets, without listening to people, without coming to shows like this, or being a part of communities that I run, or being a part of the community that you run, which you're going to tell people about later on. Like you did all of that without all of that. And like what's cool is like I hope people take away like, wow, like you're not going to get into this because I think so many people are scared of that first step. So I hope what people take away from this is like, you're not going to die. Like you might lose some money. You might but even the property you went in, it's worth $300 and some thousand now. Like guys, real estate, I always say that like real estate's forgiving if you give it enough time, right? If you're not in it for like a fly by the night, seat of your pants kind of thing, like you're in it for that long-term wealth, which Ingrid, it sounds like you are, which is really, which I think really covers a lot of mistakes. You know?
Yes, definitely it is. This is not a get rich quick. Like if someone's looking to get rich in 6 months, a year, I would say maybe real estate is something to consider. But you're right. Like if you asked me the first year with this property, I would have been like, no, Sam, I hate it. It's horrible. We're trying to evict this tenant. But now then we discover bigger pockets and other investors and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, maybe we should do things differently. Like all of this is happening because we didn't have knowledge. We didn't have a foundation. We didn't have the right support system, right community. Like we made mistakes. Like we were trying to reinvent the wheel instead of utilizing tools and resources like this podcast where you get to talk to people and listen to people like Bigger Pocket, other communities. Like, we didn't do any of that, and we survived. We
That's crazy. That's great.
And yes, definitely people nowadays, they have the tools, they have the knowledge. Now you gotta be careful because then you get into paralysis analysis when you have all this knowledge and you don't want to execute. But definitely, if I can survive, if we can survive this after making so many mistakes, like your listeners, like you guys, this is possible. If you are strategic about it, if you talk to other investors like Cyan, myself, other ones, we're here to help. Like, we're not here to be like, oh, this is my secret, I don't want to share anything. I'm all about sharing my mistakes so people don't make them.